Welcome to the latest in our ImpactWayv Podcast Series, Making a Difference. I'm Karen Talamelli-Cusick, and I'm thrilled to welcome back Charles Boehm. Charles is a writer, editor, communications professional, analyzing and reporting on all levels of soccer in the U.S. and around the world. Charles just returned from Qatar, where he was covering the 2022 Men's World Cup. So thrilled to welcome you back, Charles.
Karen, it's such a pleasure to be here. I can't believe I didn't step on any toes in the first episode. I'm just so pleased to get an invite.
Oh, always. You have an open invitation, Charles. It's wonderful to welcome you back. How about if we start by if you could give us your initial impressions of your overall experience?
Well, yeah. So, not just me, but I'm sure, I think you many of your colleagues, many of those listening are sort of still fresh in the afterglow of the tournament as a whole. We're speaking one day after Sunday's championship final, which was, even by the standards of the World Cup, an epic occasion. Two of the best, probably the best players in the world right now, locking horns, two excellent teams, incredible drama, incredible spectacle. And so, many people are even accounting for recency bias. Many people are calling this the best final ever. Some people consider it the best World Cup ever. And I think I'm sort of, I guess I'm fortunate in that I've had two different experiences. I had an on-site experience of the World Cup, not as a fan per se, but a fan of the game. I covered a number of games there on in person, and then I was able to go to games that I didn't have to work. So, I was taking things in slightly more of a fan perspective. And then I came home after during the round of 16 and was able to sort of consume the event as a television fan and a television viewer and a fan at home. So for me, I think it shows the power of the sport, shows the power of the tournament. The product is so irresistible. It's so compelling. And I do think it was particularly engaging this year and drew in a lot of new fans. When you hear from people like my 80-something-year-old mother and how many people in her life, including her and people her age, were captivated by it. It's really striking. And I think the sort of modern, at least in the United States, and I think it applies probably in many places around the world, the World Cup is this sort of high watermark that we get every 3 or 4 years, where you catch a lot of casuals and a lot of newcomers to the sport, and they don't all stick around. But that high watermark leaves you a new standard, and even when things, the glow of the tournament recedes, you get a lot of excitement, a lot of new interest in the sport, and so I think we're definitely seeing that happen in real time. My experience on site was a little more complicated, a little more complex, and we can unpack it, I think, in the next 30 minutes or whatever it may be. But I think there's a little more nuance there. But it's definitely hard to resist the product, as we've all experienced.
Yeah, well, that's great. It seems like three as a spectator, as a reporter, and then as a television fan, you've got it all covered here. And while you were there, did you feel you were being monitored in Qatar as you were reporting, and how did it affect your reporting?
Yes. I will start by saying, the sites that I was working for were not exclusively focused on the on-field action, but that was the main focus. I was there as a soccer reporter first and foremost. So I had neither the assignments or the bandwidth to delve as fully into the big questions, the big, I guess, flashpoints of this tournament in Qatar as a whole, in terms of, there were reporters who went much further than me, who went out into the hinterlands and experienced the migrant workers' conditions and their day-to-day reality, and interacted more with them. And so I was spending more time just sort of by the nature of my assignments within this FIFA bubble. And the one metaphor I found myself using a lot is that Qatar itself, and I'm using I guess I should say too, I did learn that, we sort of all pronounce the country wrong. Qatar is technically the way to say it correctly in Arabic. And I learned that the sounds involved are not sounds that our Western languages tend to have. So I guess I should just note that that was a fun part of the experience. Simply learning that the country is so complex in so many ways and so different from the United States that even the act of saying its name has these layers to it. And there were layers to the culture, layers to the experience. In Qatar, it felt like a little bit like a bubble in the sense that you have this extremely wealthy place sitting on one of the largest natural gas fields on Earth that has one of the highest per capita incomes, has one of the highest carbon footprints, the native population is a minority. I don't know that I actually ever met. If I met any native Qataris there, I didn't know it. Wow. The vast majority of the population are expats or migrant workers, and so there's a sort of a distinct sense of something of being in a little bit of a bubble there as a Westerner there, and then seeing sort of this great leap forward that this nation is attempting to pull off, to do things that other societies have done in hundreds of years, and they want to do it in dozens of years or less. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to a FIFA event, and this is my second now, and comparing it now to my time working at the World Cup, the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, I've learned now when you go to any FIFA event, you are entering a different sort of bubble. So anywhere FIFA goes and sets up their facilities, their stadiums, their media centers, you are entering a different phase of sort of reality. And so there was this sort of double bubble effect that was a little surreal at times. It was very interesting. But I spent a lot of time in those FIFA environments, and those are inherently contrived. It's part of the show, and it's just sort of a different refraction of what you're seeing on television at home. So I wish that I had a less rigorous schedule to just sort of wander around and get outside of these bubbles and this, in particular, the tournament grind and everything. So there's some, I think I left meat on the bone there. And but in general, it was very much, I think you're very much conscious that you're in a surveillance state. And this is not limited to Qatar. This is an increasingly modern governance thing that you get in certain places in the U.S. more than others. But a lot of use of surveillance technology, CCTV cameras, security cameras everywhere. I think I had a clear sense that, and the security around the FIFA facilities and anywhere the World Cup events are happening was enormous. I mean, just the sheer manpower. There were these sort of black with blue and red trimmed security uniforms, and they were just, it felt like twice or three times as many as were needed anywhere you went. It was just an overwhelming security presence. And every trip into a stadium or into the media center or another facility like that was the equivalent of, sort of felt like going to an airport. Through a metal detector. I'm sorry, I'm dog sitting my sister's dog. But you're going through a metal detector. Your stuff is being searched with varying degrees of intensity. And then the last thing I guess I would say on this front is that there's definitely a little bit of a cult of personality, I think, in terms of the emir and the royal family. That you would see these images of Al Thani, the emir, the head of the government, and this is a hereditary monarchy, which has very little in the way of pluralistic or democratic institutions. But his like during the blockades, they've been at sort of varying stages of conflict and rivalry with Saudi Arabia and other regional counterparts / rivals in Qatar, and there was a regional blockade that lasted several years, and during that time, I guess this sort of stylized image of the emir became very popular and became this sort of signpost of national pride, and you see it everywhere. It's on that this sort of stylized profile of the emir was on a side of a building, or it might be on a bumper sticker on a car, or on the top of a skyscraper, and so I think I got little senses there of the the very different way of governance and the very different relationship that the government has with its citizens there.
had to be incredibly interesting above and beyond all the World Cup. Did you feel, you were talking about these bubbles, so that where you were, that Qatar was addressing the human rights issues and the other concerns that kind of followed, or this World Cup perhaps created?
I think that there was above and beyond overall for the government and the Supreme Committee, which is the sort of quasi-government entity that was overseeing the tournament itself. They were clearly eager to put their best foot forward, to have the world, they knew they had the world's attention in a way that nothing else can do. The Olympics and the World Cup are right up there, right? And there's very little that can match the sheer volume of eyeballs around the globe. And they were very conscious of that opportunity and the desire to put Qatar in the conversation in any way possible, but ideally in the most positive way and the most compelling way, and to make this, not just a place that in their words, in widespread Qatari opinions, this was the best World Cup ever. And that's, we made that happen, and we welcome the world. But they want to be, they're very, very resentful, I think, in a lot of ways. And I know this is a generalization, but in speaking in terms of like what you would get in local media or how officials would respond. I mean, there was a worker death at one of the training sites, at the Saudi Arabian training site during the tournament. And it took days for it to get dug up by members of I think it was the UK, the athletics UK staff. Adam Crafton did some incredible reporting while he was there, and as well as many others. But when this news comes out that a worker had actually died on site, where a team was headquartered, was training, the initial reaction from one of the top tournament officials was anger that this was the first question being asked to him, right? So why, we're having the World Cup. Why would this death is a natural part of life. And he made some really tone deaf quotes, at least again, and from my perspective, and probably from the perspective of many abroad, where it was just, it felt like, there was so much national identity riding on this, and so much of a backlash towards any questioning of the narratives that the host country wanted to dominate. And that included LGBTQA rights and a number of other topics where it was sort of like, and it becomes, again, there's layers of reality here, because this government has a documented track record of using social media campaigns, of seeding, attacking people on social media who were perceived to be, against them, or producing reporting or narratives that were unflattering or undesirable to Qatar. So I think it's very hard too, because there is also, probably some racism and some old sort of fashioned ideas and some outmoded thinking that colored some of the analysis of the tournament in the country. And it became very difficult to draw the right line and to have the conversation that was constructive, I think. But I think it was, I think definitely there were sincere attempts were made in that regard. And as I said, in our previous chat, my hope is that this becomes more the norm, because I think we're in a new era in which big time sporting events are inevitably going to be politicized to some extent, and that will be even more so the case in a different context when it comes here to North America. And we should be prepared to have that spotlight on us as a society, as nations, as as cultures and governments. And I think while it was a little bit unsightly and continues to be a difficult topic to navigate, I think in the big picture, we just have to acknowledge that the world is changing in this regard.
Right, and be prepared for it. And, you touched on a couple topics there that made me think of, I know that you suffered a great loss of a dear friend, Grant Wahl, and I do extend my sincere sympathy. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Could you, perhaps give us an idea how this is affecting the soccer journalist community? From all I've heard, he was an incredibly incredible man who was incredibly beloved by this community.
Yes. And first of all, thank you for that. And I know it means a lot to me and to the many people, incredible numbers of people who interacted with Grant or were touched by him in some way over his career. And yeah, I mean, this was in many ways the standard bearer, I think, one of the leading standard bearers, one of the brightest voices in the industry, speaking about, soccer media in general, globally. He had entered that international level, that multinational sort of tier of popularity and respect. But he was above all an American soccer journalist. And, it's a small but growing segment of the media landscape. And he did as much as anyone did to put it on the map and to grow it. And he helped a lot of careers get started. Even my interactions with him early on in my career as a full-time soccer journalist were, when I look back on them, it was influential, setting just having an inclusive mindset, encouraging people to follow their passion and follow, examples set by people like him into the field, and to try and grow the game. And we talk about a lot in American soccer about growing the game, and it's a little bit of an unused or an overused cliche sometimes, but it really applied here because Grant Wahl was incredibly consistent and persistent about trying to grow that sphere, even though he didn't have to, having been one of the first to sort of make a name, make a reputation and a sustainable living in the industry. Not everyone follows the path that he did to bring others along, but I think that's his legacy, alongside the incredible work he did for, more than 2 decades, somewhere north of a quarter century.
That's amazing, and it's a wonderful legacy and a tribute. And in addition to that remarkable legacy, by all accounts, he was a champion for several causes. And you mentioned the LGBTQ experience you had there, and he seemed to make a statement. Do you think his loss will inspire others to pick up the baton and for the causes that Grant was so passionate about?
Yeah, I think I think he evolved in a really impressive way as of his voice and his attitude towards these things, because I think during the time that Grant's been at the top of the field, the scope and the range of conversations we're having have become broader, right? And we've become the importance of having diversity of voices and diversity of backgrounds, and recognizing the personal perspectives of everyone. The old sort of Cronkite era idea of this robotic, dispassionate observer, I think, has faded a bit. And Grant, I think, was when I look back, I didn't really think of it at the time, but I mean, there was a bravery and an elegance and a risk that he took to allow himself to be, part of the story at times. I mean, I think his experience, his brother is a member of that community, of the LGBT community, and how could it not affect your perspective as a human being? Going to a country where homosexuality is effectively criminalized.
Yeah.
How could your brother's relationship with you and his experiences not be part of your toolkit that you take to that environment? And so, I was at the stadium, I believe it was at Ahmed bin Ali Stadium, where Grant was detained for having a really innocent shirt with a soccer ball and a rainbow around it. And it was, was threatened and had some negative interactions with security. And, that I think became a flashpoint in a way that, I think from what we hear, it inspired death threats to Grant himself. It also, I think, made the reality on the ground more tactile and more urgent and understandable for everyone involved. And he made previous trips, spent significant time taking real risks without, I should say, the backing and the protection of a large media entity, that most journalists in his position would have. I mean, he's reporting for grantwahl.com, and he's going out of his way to try and have honest conversations with migrant workers about their experiences in Qatar. Again, I was impressed with it at the time. And then, when you look back and having been there, the bravery of that and the empathy that was involved in that was really, really inspiring. And I think that's a huge part of Grant's legacy and his final days of work. And he was working right up to the end. And sadly, I can also relate a little bit to the conditions that seem to play a role in his passing, because it was an exhausting environment. There were so many, because of television times around the world, there were so many big games that took place, including all three of the 4 U.S. Games at the World Cup were 10 p.m. local time kickoffs. So a night like that, you would be routinely working until 4, 5, 6 in the morning sometimes. And I will always wonder, even though it seems that there was a heart condition that was developing without anyone's notice, I'll always wonder how the grind of this tournament in particular played a role. I can't help but think about that, and getting ready to go to his memorial service in a couple of days here. And, I think I'm thankful that his wife Celine and their family, released further information that suggests that seemed to conclusively prove there was nothing nefarious or any foul play involved in his passing, despite the circumstances that sort of raise questions. But it's, it can be a real grind, and he embraced that grind throughout his career. But in particular in this tournament, it was difficult, and his work rate was up to the very end, just incredible.
That's amazing. Sounds like such an incredible man of integrity and character, and willing to take a stand where others might take a seat, especially when you're out in the public and, trying to make your living on your name. And it's pretty admirable to take such a stand on behalf of many who don't get the chance. So, you had mentioned, I was going to say the last game, the final, was a thrilling affair, as you alluded to. Maybe the best match ever played at the World Cup. But are there any other highlights, or do you want to talk about, the final and how it'll be the lasting image of this particular tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, the the power of this sport and this event in particular is, you watch that game and regardless of your relationship to soccer in general, I think even a newcomer could find themselves wrapped, in that moment and the drama of things and the clear stakes and the stadium atmosphere. The Argentine fans in particular were incredible throughout the tournament, paying ludicrously high rates, and anecdotally, we're hearing of life savings being blown, to get from Argentina to Doha to witness this firsthand. Yeah. They were, most of their games were in Lusail, which is one of the biggest stadiums in terms of capacity. Their supporter culture was amazing. I think you got a great illustration of it, a great snapshot in the final, even though the final is often a tougher ticket for average fans to get. Excuse me. And the experience of Leo Messi, finishing his, as best we know, I mean, he has thankfully said he's not going to retire straight away from international play. But for Messi to play what was likely his last World Cup match on that stage, to step up the way he did, he's clearly inspired his entire team throughout this tournament and now a nation as well. It's just the drama of it was incredible, and this is why nations and politicians and companies and corporations want to be part of it. They want to be connected to this event and this organization because it has this power of the human spirit. And the final was incredible. I have a number of other memories because my firsthand experiences were very, very vivid. But man, here we are on Monday. It's hard to talk about anything else, right? Argentina, France, Mbappe versus Messi. just an incredible occasion.
Yeah, it was. I'm getting Chelsea hearing you talk. And like you said about the human spirit, it's amazing how it just felt like there is such a spirit worldwide that comes together over this. You'd almost hope you could bottle it and contain it for a bit longer than the event. It's kind of nice, maybe just before the holidays, to have kind of that hope of bonding, throughout.
It's true. And I have to say, I mean, soccer is not the only sport that brings people together. It's not the only occasion, but I think it's, especially in the US, it's probably never a bad idea for someone in my position to underline the near universality of it. We all love consuming the Summer and Winter Olympics, and we become, curling experts for a few weeks, right, and dive into it and love that experience and are unified by it. But soccer is just on a different plane in terms of the number of people who participate, the way it is passed down, how deeply woven it is to so many cultures around the world. There's just nothing else. And you'll see today there have been some social media posts making the round comparing it to what is our tentpole event on the U.S. sporting landscape. It tends to be the Super Bowl that people point to, and it's something like 4 or 5 times the audience yesterday for the World Cup final globally that the Super Bowl draws. So it's always good to be reminded, I think, of our place in that cosmos.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I was thinking about the Olympics too, but everybody has their favorite sport or whatever. But here you're all coming together. Charles, when we last spoke, we mentioned what could possibly be the lasting legacy of this particular World Cup in Qatar. And I hope I'm saying it right because I did look it up, and perhaps did you think the country achieved their goals?
These are great questions, and we could probably devote a whole episode just to this particular facet. And I'm fascinated by it. And I think as a sort of soft power exercise, I think it has to have been an overall success for the country and the government, because the quality on the field, the engaging nature of the matches and the play was is inevitably the focus, right? Because the conversations off the field and around the tournament are inherently more subjective and just don't draw the sort of volume of attention that the games themselves do. And I think you have to look at the way they asserted what to me was, I think, the one of the sort of fundamental, more objective qualms that you could have about Qatar's management and hosting was that this is a government that's a hereditary monarchy. There's not really, at least it wasn't to me, clear accountability. And so transparency and accountability are not necessarily inherent to that system. And certainly that's not the only place in the world where that applies. But, for example, yanking beer sales out of the planned locations in and around stadiums a matter of days before the tournament started, that conversation came to be dominated by sort of the question of alcohol and do we really need alcohol? Well, that's not actually the deeper point, or the more fundamental point was agreements that were set up years in advance were changed at the 11th hour by the whims of the local government. And then to see similar things happen when it came to even just the act, I thought there's a fascinating conversation happening today around the trophy ceremony, which was, unfortunately, American viewers had to change over to a different network because Fox, in its wisdom, left the NFL slot on the main Fox channel, and you had to switch over to FS1 to watch the trophy ceremony. But being that what it is, the Emir of Qatar garbed Leo Messi in a bisht, a sort of regional piece of garb, a sort of robe that is an honor within Arab culture and a pan-Arabic sort of gesture of respect and achievement to Leo Messi, which in a vacuum is a cool little cultural quirk, right? But this was happening on international television in direct violation of the FIFA statutes that FIFA did not hesitate to wield against players or teams who wanted to make what would have also been interesting and mostly harmless, and certainly not disruptive gestures in support of human rights or tolerance. And so the inconsistency with which FIFA was applying and its own regulations, I think, was the deeper point. And it's it became clear to me with incidents like that, and that FIFA was not necessarily in charge the way that they normally are. Normally, wherever they go, they're setting up their own sort of little fiefdom for a few weeks or for a month, and their norms apply there. That's how they can shelter themselves from having to pay taxes. They don't have to pay taxes to the host nations, for example, right? There's so much power they wield in their own interests. But in this case, I think it became clear that Qatar was, applying its own sort of ideas of what it considered right in a way that was not consistent with past tournaments or what was expected. So I think that's the deeper issue, though. I think in a more positive sense, it was inspiring for me to see the value and the power of anytime one of these events is held outside of the traditional power centers. And these are soccer's historic power centers and the economic power centers of the sport and our society in general, which is Europe and in the soccer context, South America. So this was clearly a more accessible event for people from sub-Saharan Africa, from the Arab world, throughout the Middle East, and from South Asia. And so, to see, for example, legions of Argentina fans clad in the blue and white Argentina jerseys, but they are from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh. And for them, with their nations not necessarily being soccer powers, they're consuming this sport through their adulation for Messi in Argentina. And that was really cool, I thought. That was an example of this event and this location breaking new ground or showing a new facet of the game and its devotees. So, and I think, again, even the contentious aspects of the conversation or the dialogue about migrant workers and LGBTQ rights, I think that we can apply some of the lessons from this going forward. And again, I think we're now in a time where the idea of separating politics and soccer, to me, is more outmoded and unrealistic than ever. If it ever made sense, it certainly does not anymore in the 21st century that we're living in. And so let's just embrace that, and let's look at accountability, and let's take a broader lens.
That's great. We so appreciate your insights, and it has been a pleasure to have you here. I am so thrilled that you came back to speak with us as you invitation. It's truly been a pleasure, Charles.
I'm so sorry for my house guests' many interruptions.
That's okay. It's worth it. Everybody has their say into it. But Charles Boehm, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Charles, you're always welcome.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's been a privilege and a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks. Hope to see you next time, everyone.